we have been talking about being a steward, which is an unusual idea in today's world, because you and I, by nature, believe that we're owners. We own everything. We own everything. We own our money. We own our job. We own our body. We own our life. We own our house. We own everything. But what the Bible really says is, no, you know what? God owns everything. Everything. Your money, your body, your job, your children. God owns everything. For without God, you would not be here. Without God, you wouldn't have a mind to work. Without God, you wouldn't have the ability to have a job. So everything belongs to God, and we are stewards. So the idea in this particular series is to try to get us to think like stewards. What is a steward? A steward is a manager, not an owner. So you and I are managing the things that God has blessed us with, which some of you have told me that is so relieving, to think that I don't have to pull this whole world off. I don't have to do all of this stuff that I by nature try to control. Instead, I trust every day that God has that under control, and I kind of reel back responsibilities, and I manage what God has given me. Listen to this little story by Max Lucado. We ready, Jeff?
I think so.
And my particular device may not be ready, so hold on a second. Here we go. Now I think we're ready.
He's going to tell the story in just a moment. But before he does that, he says to the disciples, "Now why are you afraid?" My father used to ask me this kind of question. When I was 6 years old, he let me stay up with the rest of the family and watch the movie Wolfman. Boy, did he live to regret that decision. Since we watched the movie in the den, I was convinced in my little 6-year-old mind that the Wolfman spent each night prowling our den, working his way in between the lazy boy and the couch and hiding under the coffee table, just waiting his preferred dinner of first-grade boy. And this proved problematic because to get from my bedroom into the kitchen, I had to walk right through the den. And it seemed that every night I would get up and I would want to get my midnight glass of milk. But to do so, I had to pass perilously close to the fangs and the claws of the Wolfman hiding in the shadows. And I would take one step into the den and I would retreat. And I would walk directly to my parents' bedroom, step over to my dad's side of the bed, and I'd put my hand on his shoulder and I'd wake him up and I'd say, "Dad, I'm afraid." And part of me was in awe that he was asleep in that storm. How could he sleep with such a culprit loose in our house? And he would open one eye and he would look at me and he would say something like, "Now why are you afraid?" How could he not know? And I would remind him of the terror down the hall. He would climb out of bed and he would arm himself with superhuman courage. You know, he was never afraid to walk through that den. I stood in absolute awe of him. And I grabbed a hold of his t-shirt and I walked in lockstep behind him as he led us right past the monster himself. And he would wait patiently as I poured that glass of milk and I drank it, and I would look up at him and I would think to myself, what kind of man is this?
Now, you and I have a Wolfman in our life. Might not be like a first grader's Wolfman, but you and I have things, you and I all have something that is a bully that threatens to take away our lunch money. You've got something that just scares you. You have something that just, you try not to think about, and then all of a sudden life, saw a commercial on TV or something reminds you of it, and you go right back, and it terrifies you like a first grader scared of the Wolfman. I know you've got something. It could be something physical. It could be something, a fear of something in the future, not having enough. Doctor's report. You have something. And we're talking about being a good steward. And part of being a good steward is that we listen to the master, listen to the owner. But that Wolfman actually gets in your way of hearing. One of the greatest historians, people that understand the Jewish people and the Hebrew people is Ray Vanderlaan, and he says this: the ancient Jews, the ancient Jewish people feared large bodies of water. This was their Wolfman. They referred to the sea as an abyss and saw it as a symbol of chaos and hell. Cultural stories depicted the sea as a monstrous beast and a place where gods of the sea would battle each other. Jewish people, Hebrew people, ancient Hebrew people were not swimmers. And they were just terrified. They say even the fishermen really weren't too thrilled about going out onto the water. So for them, their Wolfman was like large bodies of water, like the sea. I don't know what your Wolfman is, but you've got one. So here is a verse that is directed toward the Hebrew Wolfman. And it goes like this: God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. This is a passage that is challenging the people to believe that God is strong even when Wolfman is near, even when life is chaotic. See, you and I, to be good stewards, we have to be good listeners of God. And the Wolfman sometimes gets in the way. Here's the passage. It says, God is the refuge and strength, even if there's chaos, the worst kind of chaos. Therefore, we will not fear. Like even if there was an earthquake. To the Jewish mind, the most stable thing on this planet was the earth. Something that they could depend on was the earth, was the mountains. That was stable. That was just a symbol of something that was always there and would always be there. But what happens if one day there's an earthquake and that which seems stable is shattering around us in its chaos? What if they would fall into the heart where Wolfman lives? And Wolfman seems to win. Though his waters roar and foam and the mountains, the thing that is stable, the thing that you can count on is shaking. You see the little star? The little red star at the end? in your Bible, it's a footnote. It actually, if it's the New International Version, it's a number 3. And this is one of the things that's so interesting about the Bible when you put your thinking cap on and you really start to get into it. What does the number 3, what is that for? What is the asterisk for? What is the star for? Because it's in connection with that God is strong, and it's in connection with the fact that you and I as stewards need to be good listeners, and there are things that sometimes cause us not to be good listeners, and it's the chaos of life, and especially when Wolfman comes around. So that star, with a number 3 in the New International Version, if you look it up, it says, this stands for the word Selah. It's a Hebrew word. It's an ancient word. And you know what it means? It means a time to reflect, a time to pause, a time to stop. You know, Psalm 43, like many psalms, is actually meant to be sung. It was written as music. I mean, these are the lyrics to some song that we don't know the words to. But this was meant to be sung. And whenever there's the word Selah that comes along in these songs, it means a pause in the music. It means that the author wants us to think about what was just sung. So that's a common thing in music even today, that there are pauses in the music so that hopefully we will reflect on what's going on. So let me just make up a melody like this. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. So let's pretend that was the melody. Then they would pause. And sometimes this could be instrumental music that would just go on with no lyrics, or it could be just a pause with no music at all. And it's meant so that people will say, when I get to the boogeyman part, when I get to the Wolfman part, when life is chaotic, when even the things that I can depend on most are quaking in fear, it's saying, I need to go back to the thought that God is my refuge and strength. And what I need to do is be quiet. I need to quit talking. I need to quit singing. I need to quit whatever. And I need to reflect. I need to pause. And I need to stop and just Selah. Just remember that God is our refuge and strength. So the little first grade boy is all worked up because Wolfman is present in the house and everything is unstable. And so he goes and he's reminded that his father is his refuge and strength. And when he began to just stop his running around and focus on his father, even Wolfman was manageable. So, we're talking about being a good steward, okay? We're talking about the fact that as stewards, instead of as owners of our life, as stewards, we need to be good listeners. So, as stewards, when chaos happens in our life, when that which is stable falls into the heart of the sea and Wolfman is winning, we need to reflect, pause, stop, Selah. Nah, but here is our instinctive way, is it not? When Wolfman is near, when chaos is happening, we tend to go faster and listen less. We tend to run more. We tend to worry more. That is our instinct. And the problem is this, that we already live fast and loud. I mean, don't we? We live at a pace that is faster probably than any other civilization. We live at a pace in where we walk faster. We live at a pace in which we listen more. We listen continually. We live in a pace that every time that we come home, the first thing we do is we turn on the TV. We've always got noise. We're at such a fast pace. But that's counteractive to being really a good steward, because a good steward listens. Remember what Selah means? Remember what the verse said? It says, when chaos happens, when Wolfman is winning, what do we need to do? We need to stop and reflect. But our tendency is to run even faster and turn the volume up even more. All right, so there's a guy in the Bible named Elijah. Elijah he had just come through a spiritual victory, unbelievable victory. You remember that story of Elijah, and he's taking on the prophets at Mount Carmel, and fire comes down from heaven. It's an incredible story in the book of 1 Kings. Right after that, he's very depressed because he's worn out. And there's this evil lady called Jezebel that says, I'm going to kill you for what you just did. You got like 24 hours and I'm going to kill you. So Elijah, he goes off alone into the desert because he's depressed. He just wants to get away. And frankly, he would love it if his life would just end, if he would just die out there in the desert so that Jezebel didn't have to kill him. I mean, he's that depressed. So Wolfman is after him. Life is stressful. Life is chaotic. And then God says this to Elijah. He says, I want you to go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. For the Lord is about to pass by. And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. We would assume that if God is near, if God is going to speak, if we're in the presence of God, that his voice, his presence, everything about him would be loud. And so Elijah now goes, and God is in his presence, and there is this powerful, like tornado, like wind. And so Elijah assumes that's got to be God, because God must be loud and God must be very boisterous when he talks. And then there was an earthquake. But God wasn't even in the earthquake. And then at the end, God was found through a gentle whisper. Here's what I found in my life. Satan screams and God whispers. I want to be a good listener. I need to be a good listener. I don't want to be an owner anymore of my life. I want to be a steward. I just want to manage. But in order for me to really manage well, I've got to listen. But God isn't screaming at me. God whispers. This is so hard because we live in a hurry. It's so hard because we live loud. Everything's in our ears. Everything's on. We don't like silence. We get in the car, the radio's on. We get home, the TV's on. And we speed up when we're stressed. And then don't forget about the Wolfman. When the Wolfman comes along, life's already hard. We're already not good listeners because we're so loud and we're so fast. And then when Wolfman comes along, you might as well forget it. Let me just give you one more story. This is in the book of Exodus 14, verse 10. Remember how the story goes? God's people, the Israelites, were in slavery for hundreds of years to the Egyptians. And then God miraculously frees them. They had been crying out to God, "Oh God, free us, let us go. These Egyptian masters are just terrible. They're beating us every day. They're working us to death. God, give us freedom." So God miraculously figures out a way that they can head toward freedom. And so it starts off with this. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them, and they were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Let me kind of map this out here a little bit. So on the left is like just a reminder like of the Egyptians and their chariots and their army. And God had basically told the Israelites that they could be free. They just need to get going. I mean, I'll show you where to go. And so they start to head out in the direction that God wants them to head. And so in the little picture here, the Egyptians are on the left, and they're chasing the Israelites who are in the middle. And where are they headed toward? Yes, they're headed toward the Red Sea. What is the sea to a Hebrew? The sea is chaos. To the Hebrew, the sea is where Wolfman lives. And God says, I'm going to free you out of your slavery. You head that way. And so they head that way. And the Egyptians are behind them, and they're chasing them to try to get them back. And they want to kill them. And so here they are now between the Egyptians and Wolfman. So what would God say? Well, Moses answered the people, don't be afraid. Now remember, on one side are the Egyptians. On the other side is Wolfman. And they're in the middle. And God says, this is what I'm going to say through Moses. Don't be afraid. You know what you need to do? Not what you normally do. Not get stressed out and run faster and be louder and listen less. What we would normally do is, okay, think. What are we going to do? Think. We got Egypt here. We got Wolfman here. Think. What are we going to do? I don't care what it is. We just got to do something. We can't just stand here. Do something. Run fast. Do something. That's what we do. And God says, now, here's what you do. Stand there. Don't just do something. Stand there. No, God, you got to know, God. The Egyptians are coming. Wolfman's on the other side, and you want me to stand here. God, I have to do something. Let me do something. Well, what are you going to do, human being? What are you going to do? You're going to defeat the Egyptians? No. Are you going to be able to defeat Wolfman? No. So what are you going to do? You might as well just stand there and let the owner decide. Oh, that's so hard. Some of you are right there now, aren't you? God brought some of you here today at this moment just to remind you to stand still. Because if you could have done something, you would have already. Stand still. Breathe. Enjoy this day. I don't know what God's going to do with your Egyptians, and I don't know what God's going to do with the Wolfman. But it's the way God is. He's the owner. He's going to work it out. So stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. All I want you to do is stand firm in faith and watch me work. The Egyptians you see today, you're never going to see again. I love this part. This part ought to be a good memory verse. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. Stewards, you're not the owner. You don't have to say it out loud, but you could just think it. I just need to be still. I know you got Egypt on one side, Egyptians. I know you got Wolfman. What are you going to do about it? God says you could. You could be still and know. So here's some thoughts. Are you going too fast? Are you living your life so fast and so loud that you really can't hear God to begin with? And is your life full of chaos? Is Wolfman close? Then here it is. Breathe, reflect, remember, God is stronger. Can you do that? Breathe, just reflect, realize God is stronger. I know you want to run. You come in here running. You come in here stressed out. You come in here saying, God, do something. Well, we got circle. And God is saying, Selah. Breathe. Be still. And know. Jeff, would you run this track for me? The Lord will never leave you nor forsake you. Even if the mountains quake, even that which seems most stable in your life, if that's falling apart and cast into the heart of where Wolfman lives, Your answer as a steward is to Selah. Reflect how good God is. Remember, he's never failed you. Remember, he is the same today as he was yesterday. Relax. Know that he is God. Help us now, Lord, to allow that to sink deep within us, because we're so running so fast, and life is so loud to begin with, and it's so hard to hear you to begin with, and then chaos strikes, and we just run faster and listen less. Help us to stop and breathe and remember, you've got this. You're the owner. We're just the manager. You'll work it out. In Jesus' name.